Hi, today we're looking at one of my favourite new games actually. It's called Cuba. It's a resource management game for 2 to 5 players, and it's become one of my favourite games. Cuba is set in a pre-revolutionary, Cuba. It's where villagers strive for independence and wealth and competing against each other to become wealthier and more independent villages. So let's have a look at what we get first in the box. A whole heap of different tokens to use for resources and goods. Wood, stone, water, sugar, citrus, tobacco, cigars, and of course rum. It has a fantastic little rulebook. We've got a whole heap of money. We've got some players' resource boards. Each is double-sided with slight variations, and each player will have one of these. There are some meeples. There are some various scoring tokens and a couple of other little markers used to denote different things. And we have a whole pile of buildings. A few short reference boards, and we've got some legislative cards here, which to do with the Parliament and the various laws and statutes that get implemented, which have an effect on how we all play the game. And there are some worker cards for each player, full set. Each player has the same ones. And over here we've got a set of ship cards, which denote what ships can carry or want to be loaded up with. Cuba, at its heart, is based around 2 main components. One is this resource board, which is where buildings are placed, and it's also where workers access resources of various types, and also affects how foremen control what buildings are activated. The player cards give you the various business people that run various components of your business. There is firstly the worker. The worker denotes where your meeple is placed and how you score resources. The tradeswoman denotes where you go to the market and you can buy and sell various things to get money or to gain things which you need to load the boat with or to process to become something you can sell or put on a boat. An architect, he's responsible for building your buildings. When you play the architect card, you gain a building from the starting rank here, and you pay the cost of its construction cost, which comes in the form of wood, water and brick, depending on what building you're building, and you place it on the board. Now the architect has one other little function. He can gain you some victory points instead of doing a building, so he's useful. Foreman, who's in charge of running the buildings that you build, and the mayor, whose main responsibility is either loading the boat with the various things you've produced or scoring you a bit of money. Now the ship cards quite clearly show you what is required to load onto that ship. In this case, this ship I might be able to load on a citrus and 1 tobacco. Each ship varies on its loading, and the random order in which they come out can make the game quite interesting. Let's look at the player's resource board in more detail. When a worker is placed, it is placed and the player scores the resources which are orthogonally adjacent to the worker. So along this line and along this line, I would score resources. If I was to place here, you would score along this line and along this line. This all creates a very different sort of approach to many games, where you really have to consider where he's placed to get the resources that you need. For example, if you need to build buildings, you've got to consider wood and brick, and occasionally water. If you're looking to load things onto ships, you need to consider your various products, such as citrus, sugar and tobacco. And sometimes you need more of them, so you place it so that you'll gain, say in this case, 2 tobacco to max out on something. While other times you might be interested in getting a variety of things. An interesting little feature of this is that if you have water in your supply already, or you would gain water, you can forego a piece of water and gain an additional product, as normally you can only gain 2. So in this case, I would normally only score 2, and I would choose either the 2 sugar or a sugar and tobacco. But if I forego my water, I would be able to take all 3. Very handy, because sometimes water is not very useful in your game plan, and you can use that to max out the other things that you might need. Now, when you build buildings, the placement of this worker and the buildings become important. Buildings are built so that they occupy one of these spaces. Now, you can immediately see from placing a few buildings here that it's going to start destroying access to some of your resources. So as you build buildings, you have to sort of come up with a plan as to what resources or products you really need to start getting you some points. So in this case, I've covered up a number of things which may or may not be detrimental. I've left myself a wood and a brick, I've left myself 2 citrus, and I've got a sugar and a tobacco. So I've got a little bit of everything still. But when the foreman card is played, you can only access the buildings in the same manner as you would access the various resources on this board. So in this case, if my worker was here and I play the foreman card, I would only access this building because there are no other buildings on there. This particular building gives me 2 votes when we come to the parliamentary session at the end of the turn. To activate all 3 buildings, I would need to be placed here, but I can only be there if my worker has placed them there. Now it's interesting that this worker stays there and is carried over in his position into the next turn. So in a following turn, I could play my foreman card before my worker card and activate my buildings before I could play my worker at a subsequent card play, and I might move him and score something else, resource-wise. Being able to place your buildings so that you can activate more than one of them is a really good thing. It makes your building placement very efficient. That means you can potentially max out on all your processing and point scoring that each building might give you access to. However, sometimes things just don't go to plan. And one of the nice things about the foreman is if you have to do a placement such as here, where I would access no buildings, the foreman has an option that instead of activating just the buildings on his lines, he is orthogonal to, that he can activate any one single building. The last feature of these cards is they have a little number in the middle there with a hand on it, and that's their voting power. Each player in his turn takes it upon himself to play one of his various cards. As he plays his cards out, he gets to do the various functions of each card. But it's important to note that only 4 of these cards are going to be played. The 5th is used for voting in the parliamentary session at the end of the turn. But because each one has a different value, the mayor having the highest, the foreman the second highest, then the architect, then the tradeswoman, and finally the worker the lowest, they've all got different usefulness. Obviously it's going to be quite useful most of the time to get your worker played out early, or maybe even your mare might be very important. When you see an opportunity to load a ship before somebody else and you've got the goods, you want to play that first. But here's the real kicker. As you play your cards out, it's the fourth card that's going to have the first real impact. The fourth number on the voting power on the fourth card is what's going to determine the next turn starting person. So in this case, if I'd played it out in this order, my worker would be the fourth one, and I would be very unlikely to become the starting player. But had I played, say, the mare fourth, I would be far more likely to become the starting player. That could be great, because next turn I might know that there's going to be a ship coming in that line there that I want to load first. And if I don't get there first, somebody might beat me. But that means at the end of the turn, this fifth card is not played. So I've got to be careful as to what I want to do, because this fifth one, the only use it has is its voting power. And the worker as a voter isn't a very powerful piece. Sometimes it's better to have the foreman or the architect, if you're not building anything that turn, as your voter. But why would you want to vote? Well, here we have the Parliament. And at the start of each turn, we have 4 piles here, and we turn over the top card and reveal the various legislative statutes that are being proposed for this term. How do these affect you, you're wondering? Well, quite simply. These affect you and allow you to either score additional points or to gain some form of advantage over another player. The voting goes so that each player uses their money, and they may put in their hand as much money as they like from their money that they have, and each peso of value will give you an additional vote. The person who wins the vote gets the interesting dilemma of choosing which 2 of these proposed legislative statutes get enacted. In other words, which 2 does he want to affect the game? Now, this might give him points, or he might play one to deny other people scoring points, or to minimize their scoring of points. The ship cards are placed in rank down the side here. They are placed so that there is 3 wharves, and each wharf will score you different points. Each good that you load onto there will score the same amount of points. However, this is the tricky bit. You can only load 1 ship at a time. The bottom ship will score me 3 points for each item I load on there. The middle one 2, and the top one 1. And I get to see what the next ship coming is, so I've got a bit of an idea of what I need to plan to get. At the end of the turn, unless the Harbour Act is in effect, the bottom ship sails and things shuffle down. So here it is, Cuba the game. Why do I like it? Why do I really like it? It's just the integration of everything. There's so much to do, there's different ways of winning, lots of things always happening. And the unique nature of how that turn unfolds is really cool to play out. How that starting player changes and how that affects people. Just everything about this game seems very well integrated and a great experience for new gamers and more experienced gamers. I think it's all about balance. Cuba seems to have it all. There's ease of play. There's a fantastic looking game. There's some really cool little mechanics happening which integrate all the various facets of the game together and make them all relevant for you to score points and have a bit of fun interacting with the other players. So, for me, it's a big thumbs up. I've really enjoyed this game. My family enjoys it. Why don't you give it a go? Anyway, thank you for your time. Have a great day.
Ready, go, ready, go.